Hello everybody, in this brief video we will be going over the basics of using the Labelbox SDK, which can allow you to unlock programmatic workflows to make the most of the tools we have to offer. So to begin with, I'll need to install the dependencies here, and then I'll install the necessary packages from Labelbox to help go over the basics that we'll discuss in this video. So once I've made these installs, there's some variables here that I need to set. So I'll show you briefly where I can find these IDs within the UI. So here I've searched for my sample project within my account. And once I'm in any project page, immediately following the project / here, I can grab an ID. And then in the case of a data set here, if I'd like to view my example jellyfish data set, for example, I can grab the data set ID right here once I'm viewing a data set in the datasets tab. So I'll return back to the SDK now. So I've now set my variables by running this cell, and I've added in my API key, which I have generated through the UI. I'll show you how to do that quickly. So in the UI, I have navigated to my account settings by clicking on my name right here. And then if I navigate to the API tab, I can create a new key. And once you create a key, you'll only be able to view it in the UI temporarily. So I'm using an old key that I've set a while ago. So we recommend you saving privately your keys that you create if you don't want to have to be returning here to create a new one for each time you use the SDK. So I've set my API key here. And now what I'm going to do in this cell is I'm calling upon the client, which is the source of most interactions within the SDK, to communicate between database objects. So I'm grabbing a project here and setting it as my project variable. And I'll also be grabbing a data set. And these are the same project and data set that I showed in the UI a moment ago. And then if I ask for my project database object here, I'll be returning that project ID, which you see here is the same as what I set before. So entering a brief discussion about how these database objects work. These database objects have fields, and you can view what these fields are for any database object by looking in our GitHub or also in our API reference. So if I run this cell here and I ask for the project name, the description of the project, and then again this data set that I grabbed, the name here. And I'll show you briefly where the project description lies. And as you see here, the description for a project is a brief tag that you can offer to remind yourself or let your teammates know what the purpose of this project is. So now in this cell that I have highlighted, we can demonstrate how fields can be updated. So I can update any field for a project database object by naming that field and then entering a new value for it. So if I run this cell here, we see that I've changed my description, and I'll return back to the UI. And if I refresh, we'll see that my description for this project has changed. So that's just a brief example of how we can update fields on a database object. So let's talk briefly about pagination. Queries from the SDK that return a list of database objects will return them as a paginated collection. And the purpose for that is so that we're only returning the necessary data that users are looking for, as the amount of this data can rise very quickly as projects become quite complex. So I asked for project.labels here. And as we see here, I'm returned a paginated collection. And if we want to iterate through this paginated collection, we can use next, the Python call next, to look at the next object in this paginated collection. And we want to avoid calling list for things that will return more than a dozen results, just for purposes of basic efficiency and cleanliness with our work. So if I run this cell here, I'm given back this label ID for the first label in the collection of labels on this project. And just to demonstrate in the UI where that label came from, If I view my data rows that have been labeled, and I were to look at this list here, these are the labels that exist in that paginated collection that I can iterate through using my next call here. I can also query in the SDK using comparison operators. So here I'm asking for the data sets that exist in my account, where the data set name is equal to the data set name that I set above, which was example jellyfish data set. And then I can ask for the projects, where the project name equals the project name I set above, which was sample project, and the description equals this description that I just changed it to. So if I run this cell, we can see that the above two queries return paginated collections because the filter parameters aren't guaranteed to be unique. So even if there is one element that's returned, it will be returned in a paginated collection so that we can always provide consistency in what we're querying and how we can iterate through these programmatically. So I asked to print my projects. I saw it was a paginated collection. And if I asked for the next item in my project, we can see that there's only one project. As I continue to ask for the next one, there was only one project given back to me. And as you see here, this is longer as it's all the fields that comprise this project object. We see our description field that we set before and our name here, right? And then other information that we can query for. And of course, as shown in this cell here, there are checks in place to make sure that these queries are valid. As you see here, if I'm asking for projects where I'm checking a data set name field, this will be an invalid query. And the solution for this check or limitation is the use of relationships. So if we want all projects that have a specific data set attached to them, we can utilize relationships to find that information. You can find all relationships for DB objects in the source code as well, both in our GitHub or API reference. So if I run this cell, I'm given back the project IDs that have this example jellyfish data set attached to that project. And I can return these relationships in a list here. And again, if I want to view the data sets that exist within the project that I set in the beginning, my sample project, I can view these data sets with this call here by asking project and then the data sets, which is asking for the relationship between a project and the data sets attached to it. So just the opposite of what I asked for here. And finally, as I have commented out for reasons of safety, I can delete any of these database objects by calling the name of that object, which I set in advance, and then the delete method. So if I wanted to delete a project, I could run this, and then same with data set, and even down to a specific data row if I had set the variable data row to an individual data row object within my account. So that's a brief summary of database objects within Labelbox and how I can view their fields, query on those fields, view relationships, iterate through paginated collections, and then delete these objects if desired. Thanks for watching.